Roberto and his little girl Rosa Belande were father and daughter. On Saturday, his family took them to be buried. They are among nearly 500 who have died in this region of southwest Haiti after Hurricane Matthew. The government has declared 3 days of national mourning for the victims starting this Sunday. But for families like Roberto's, the trauma may take years to heal.
A cement block fell on him, his wife and daughter. His wife was injured and she was sent to Likai Hospital after we found them. Then we brought the bodies to the morgue.
Everywhere you look in Jérémie, there are signs of the damage caused by Matthew. 80% of this town has been destroyed. The clear-up has begun for some, but others are amongst the country's tens of thousands of homeless.
A lot of misery and hunger. We sleep by the ocean because my house is destroyed. This is my fishing boat, so everything is lost.
Crops have been destroyed too, making people even more reliant on aid and for longer. Supplies are arriving, but authorities are worried about getting to people in the remotest areas in time. Hospitals and treatment centres have been destroyed, and where they haven't, there are signs of aid agencies' worst fears: rising numbers of cases of cholera. The Red Cross, like many NGOs, has launched an emergency appeal to provide medical, shelter, water and sanitation assistance.
This is what's left of a funeral hall in Yemen's capital, Sana'a, on Saturday. Dozens of mourners were killed in what witnesses say were airstrikes launched by the Saudi-led coalition.
This is a war crime, a crime against humanity. This was a funeral for a man in Sana'a, and now it has turned into a funeral for dozens of Yemenis. Hundreds of people were killed.
Saturday's funeral reception had been underway for the father of Brigadier Jalal al-Ruwayshan, Interior Minister in the self-proclaimed Houthi government.
People came from many different areas. After Saudi and American planes flew over Sana'a, 2 Saudi airstrikes targeted the place.
The Saudi-led coalition denies launching the raid. Among the victims of Saturday's airstrikes were senior members of the Shiite Houthi rebels fighting the internationally recognized government of President Abed Rabo Mansour Hadi. Saudi Arabia intervened in March 2015 to support the Yemeni government against Houthi rebels. The coalition has faced repeated accusations that its campaign has breached international law, with many of its airstrikes hitting civilian sites, such as school buildings and hospitals.
Government officials were to address the crowd at this religious festival in the Oromia region, and the crowd just didn't agree and tried to prevent these officials to speak, and some protesters tried even to take over the stage, and at this point the police replied with tear gas and possibly a live fire as well. There was a movement of panic, a stampede ensued, and several dozen people are feared dead. An eyewitness on the ground said that he saw at least 20 bodies on the ground. And for the moment, it's very difficult to know exactly how many people died in this stampede. It's difficult to know as well if the police fired a live fire into the crowd. But what we know is that the number of deaths, the death toll might increase when the details of what exactly happened will arise in the next few days.
Airstrikes in the Yemeni capital Sana'a have struck a funeral wake, killing more than 80 people and injuring over 500, according to the Houthi-run administration. The Shiite rebels say Saudi-led warplanes were to blame, but the coalition quickly denied any role in the attack. Witnesses say a missile tore through a hall in the south of the city, where senior Houthis were among the mourners for the father of the interior minister who died. This man says the plane struck twice while they were at the wake. We don't know how many victims there are, but there are a lot of civilian casualties. Iran, Saudi Arabia's main regional rival, called the attack a horrific and inhuman crime. But one Saudi source reportedly said no coalition operation targeted the area. The number of dead made it the worst single atrocity since the Saudi-led alliance began military operations trying to restore President Hadi to power.
A Palestinian gunman who fired from a car has killed a pedestrian and a police officer in Jerusalem. Israeli police said that he was then shot dead by one of their officers in a chase through the streets. 4 others were also wounded by the gunman. Later, the Palestinian's body was removed from the scene. The attack began near Israel's National Police headquarters, police said.
A terrorist opened fire and shot one woman, and then he continued in a vehicle in the streets of Jerusalem. He was chased by police special patrol units on a fast motorbike. Shots were then fired at our police officers on their motorbikes, who responded and shot and killed the terrorist.
Police identified the gunman as a 39-year-old from East Jerusalem who is due to start a 4-month jail sentence next week for assaulting a police officer. Authorities had warned of violence as the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, the Day of Atonement, approaches.
It's destruction akin to a war zone. Only 20% of homes in the town of Jeremy in Haiti's southwest are still intact. For several days after Storm Matthew hit on Tuesday, the town's 30,000 residents were completely cut off. Now aid is trickling through, and this man, the director of the main telecommunications network in Haiti, was one of the first to arrive.
Hurricane Hazel, which hit in 1954, was the last major cyclone they had here. All the elders of the city said this one was more devastating. You can see everything's been destroyed. Yesterday when I came, it was still flooded. Oh yes, that's a body.
Victims are still being discovered, but authorities say there are delays to the death toll updates due to poor communications. Fortunately, Michel, his wife and 4 children are safe.
This was a bedroom. From 4 o'clock, the strong winds began to come at us. Parts of the house began to fall, so we decided to escape. We had barely left when it collapsed. In 2010, I was living in Port-au-Prince when my home was destroyed. For us, it's as if the nightmare has begun again.
Martin Balter and his team are working to restore the telephone networks.
Okay, good chance. Good luck.
But it will take much more than that. The UN estimates that over 350,000 Haitians are in need of emergency aid.
The attack took place in this busy street, in front of the Israeli police headquarters. The armed motorist opened fire on pedestrians, wounding at least 2 before speeding off towards the center of Jerusalem. After a police pursuit, the attacker's car was brought to a halt.
He was chased by police special patrol units on a fast motorbike. Shots were then fired at our police officers on their motorbikes, who responded and shot and killed the terrorist. What we found inside the vehicle, which is being searched at the moment, is the terrorist had other ammunition. The areas in and around Jerusalem have been closed off in order to prevent any further terrorist attacks.
The assailant's body was later removed from the scene. The attack takes place just a few days before the Jewish day of Yom Kippur, the most solemn day on the Jewish calendar. Religious holidays in Israel, both Muslim and Jewish, often prompt a surge in attacks. Israel's prime minister praised the police's swift response.
I would like to wish a speedy recovery to the injured, and also to say that, according to the reports we're getting, this was very fast, very determined action of the Israeli police officers who chased the terrorist and killed him.
The past year has seen a series of Palestinian assaults, mainly stabbings, which have left over 30 Israelis and 2 visiting Americans dead. During that period, over 230 Palestinians were killed.
Police are searching for a Syrian asylum seeker after hundreds of grams of explosives were found in his apartment in the East German town of Chemnitz. The man, who was born in Damascus, has been named as 22-year-old Jabba al-Bakr, who arrived in Germany last year. 3 people have so far been arrested, none of them al-Bakr, 2 at Chemnitz train station and a 3rd in the town. Police have evacuated the apartment block and the area around it as they prepare to safely dispose of the explosives. A police spokesman said they had received a tip-off from a domestic security agency that al-Bakr might be about to carry out a bomb attack. but so far police said they don't know who or what al-Baqqa was trying to target. In July, 2 attacks were carried out in Germany and claimed by Islamic State, an axe attack on a train near Würzburg and a suicide bombing which wounded 20 people in Ansbach.
A truck bombing at a military outpost has killed at least 18 people and wounded dozens more in Turkey. 10 soldiers and 8 civilians died in the blast when suspected Kurdish militants detonated a 5-ton bomb in the southeast of the country. The attack occurred in the Durak outpost 20 kilometers from the town of Shemdinli, on the border with Iraq and Iran. The Hakkari province is one of the main flashpoint areas in the 3-decade-long conflict between Ankara and the militant Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK. A Tuareg militant leader has been killed in a car explosion in Mali. Sheikh Ag Aoussa was the number 2 in the High Council for the Unity of Azawad, one of many armed groups in the country. The blast occurred just 300 meters from the UN base where he'd been meeting with French and UN troops. One security source said the death was the result of running over a landmine. However, one witness said he'd been close when he saw the car blow up, and the explosion came from inside, not underneath the car. The incident is likely to further provoke tensions between rival pro- and anti-government groups of ethnic Tuaregs in Kidal. Sporadic fighting has continued in the area despite the signing of a UN-backed peace deal in 2015. Aoussa's group broke ties with a group of al-Qaeda-linked extremists who continue to carry out attacks on peacekeepers and Malian troops.
When the bomb landed, there were flames and dark smoke. It caused vomiting and dizziness. The baby isn't recovering. He has blisters and wounds. They said he'd get better, but it's not working.
This is just one line in a report from Amnesty International after analysing more than 30 attacks this year in Sudan's Darfur region. Experts are in little doubt the government has been using chemical weapons on rebels in the area's Jebel Mara mountains.
Many of the victims refer to their skin first turning white and then actually falling off within a few days after these attacks. So that's very common, and also leads us to believe that this was probably caused by some sort of a chemical agent.
The symptoms varied between these attacks, and this would tell me that there are likely to be more than one chemical in use, as well as the possibility that the chemicals were mixed or different chemicals were used at different times for different attacks.
Darfur's been embroiled in conflict since 2003, when minority groups began fighting against the Arab-dominated government. President Omar al-Bashir launched a ruthless counterinsurgency against the rebels, leading to some 300,000 deaths to date and leaving some 2.5 million displaced, with 4.4 million in need of aid. A joint UN-African Union mission has been in place since 2007, though security is still fragile, and Bashir is already wanted by the International Criminal Court on charges of war crimes and genocide. For its part, the Sudanese government has denied not just the use of chemical weapons, but intense military operations too, pointing to ongoing peace talks. Given Sudan signed the Chemical Weapons Convention in 1999, however, any proof they've been used would only add to further potential charges of war crimes.